video lesson 5.5, Colonialism and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. Now we're going to really delve into the topic about how colonies were established and the consequences of those colonies, but more so we're going to focus on the slave trade next class, so that will be an interesting class. So we're not going to get into it too much, but for right now we're just going to focus on how that slave trade developed. So first of all, let's pick up where we left off in class. So why did Europeans explore? So they had three main motivating factors, and we talked about one of these, the gold and the trade and resources like that. But there were three G's that you can remember. So the first one is glory. So they wanted the fame of finding the new trade route that would be shorter, faster, more economical for people to explore. As we know, the Catholic Church has been weakening in power, so they wanted more followers of the Catholic Church so that the Catholic Church could remain strong, and not only remain strong in Europe, but throughout the entire world. And gold. So they no longer had access to the trade from the Middle East and Asia since the sacking of Constantinople, and they wanted their own access to the gold trade of Africa. So that's one of the reasons they tried to go around Africa or go into Africa to try to gain access to all that gold that we learned about with the gold salt trade. Think back that, remember, Mansa Musa is contemporary with the sacking of Constantinople. So that contemporary means at the same time. So first, the Spanish and Portuguese try to travel around the world to look for these trade routes, and then the English and the French and Italians also join in their in this exploration. So as more quote-unquote free territory was found, conquistadors and other Europeans conquered American territory and took over native lands, often very violently and of course with the help of diseases. So think about how the conquistadors such as Hernan Cortez that we learned about in the first unit, similarly to Francisco Pizarro with the Inca, Hernan Cortez with the Aztecs. We know about the British and the Native Americans. So the Europeans come into this territory and consider it free because most of the people, with the exceptions of the Aztecs and the Inca, most of the people in what is now North America were kind of nomadic, very spread out, so they thought they were much more powerful and could be easily defeat the Native Americans. With the help of the diseases, we know that it was much easier with smallpox and things infecting the native populations to take over the territory. So what happens is they begin to establish colonies because they found all those wonderful resources, gold, silver, corn, and they could live there, and they wanted control of all these wonderful things. So they establish colonies. So colonialism is the policy or practice of acquiring full or partial political control over another country, occupying its settlers, and exploiting its resources. Exploiting means taking advantage of. So then these European countries become the mother country, which is the colonizing power, and the mother country imposes political, social, and economic control over colonies. So now, here's the map that I wanted you guys to look at just without having to worry about notes. So we can see from Spain, that's kind of this orangey, peachy color. We see they went kind of south. Here's where the Inca were. Here is where Columbus went. So we can see kind of the Caribbean and Mexico and New Spain up in California and Texas in the southwest and Florida. Then the French, they kind of went more northern and went down through, there's a river here called the St. Lawrence River. And this river allowed them access into this interior land. And then we see the British both went north and they went kind of in the middle here. And they landed where we have the British colonies. That ended up being the 13 original colonies. And then we'll get into the revolution after spring break. And also the Portuguese come here and settle in Brazil, but also in Africa, both East and West Africa, and they make it all the way to India for these spices. And we can see the Ottoman Empire is really in the middle here, blocking their trade from either of these passage routes. Okay, so also, here's a different map. think about the language groups that are in each of these countries. In Brazil, they speak Portuguese. In most of Latin America, they speak Spanish. Also, there are many Spanish speaking peoples in kind of this part of the United States. We speak English, so they speak English in Canada, except a little bit of French sprinkled in there too. So just keep that in mind about how the lasting consequences of this colonialism really play through in the next 300 years. So another consequence of colonialism was the development of an economic system called mercantilism. So mercantilism is a British economic theory that wanted to increase the power of the mother country, the colonizer, by creating a favorable balance of trade. And favorable means that the mother country would profit while taking advantage of the colony as much as possible. So the mother country needs gold to become powerful. So they explore and conquer for gold and resources. They take raw materials from the colonies, they ship them back to the mother country, create and manufacture goods from those raw materials, and then they sell those manufactured goods back to the colonies for a profit. So instead of just making everything in the colonies, they're shipping it back to the mother country where manufactories are already in place. And then they sell it back for even higher profit. So this is really not good for the colony, but it is really good for the mother country. So here we see South Carolina, very famous for their rice trade, and Massachusetts, which is very famous for lumber, fish, coal. So South Carolina also has cotton, lavender, rice. So these resources get shipped back to England on their little boats. And then from England, they're made into chairs, papers, porcelain, shoes, and these manufactured goods get shipped back to the colonies and resold. So therefore, England, the mother country, becomes much more profitable. So in order to support the reaping of these raw materials and also to have people to purchase these raw materials, colonialism necessitated labor. So the first source of labor was actually people that were indigenous or native to the Americas. So native just means you're born in that place. So Native Americans, Amerindians, Indians, whatever you would like to call them, in not just America, but in Mexico, where the Aztec Empire was, those Aztecs become the labor. Same with people in South America. So the indigenous people are the first source of labor in the Americas. And then this mercantilism develops into the triangle trade. So we can kind of see the triangles that go on here. Now we're going to, for now, just focus on the mother country and colonial trade. But we can see this point in the triangle is what is also very interesting. And this side of the triangle is what we're going to talk about next. So first we have the encomienda system. So it's the encomienda system. It was a labor system created by the Spanish to control American Indian labor. And there were all different classes of people in the encomienda system based on their race. So even people of mixed races, by varying degrees, belong to a different class, and you can see down here. So this triangle over here shows the hierarchy of race that the encomienda system established in Latin and South America. So the Spanish were granted a number of Indians to protect and to Christianize. So the Queen Isabella of Spain explicitly wrote a letter to the governors of the Spanish colonies in Latin and South America to charge them with protecting these Indians, but also to Christianize them. They wanted more followers of the Catholic Church. However, as Europeans colonized and settled in the America, the Columbian Exchange grew into this triangular trade, and they needed more labor and cheaper labor. So the triangular trade refers to the trade system between the 16th and 19th centuries, so 1500s to 1800s, between West Africa, Caribbean and American colonies, and European powers. And the part that you might be familiar with is the Middle Passage. So part of the triangular trade, the middle part, is called the Middle Passage, and it is actually a passage of people in which enslaved Africans were shipped to the Americas. So labor was shipped to the Americas for free, against their will, kept there for free, against their will, in order to profit the mother countries and the colonial powers. So again, the transatlantic slave trade, trans means across, Atlantic, the Atlantic Ocean. So slavery was not a new thing. So slavery had existed for thousands and thousands of years. However, as we commonly think of slavery today, we think of the transatlantic slave trade because that's the one we're most familiar with. So the transatlantic slave trade refers to the forced migrations of millions of Africans across the Atlantic to the Americas to undergo enslavement. Even the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, they all had slaves, but usually it was punishment for a debt or poorer people that they would capture from their society to get them off the streets and force them to work without pay. It was not based on physical features. So the transatlantic slave trade is historically unique in both the scale of the trade and the time period of the slave trade, and that enslavement was based on physical features, i.e. skin color, so that they believed that the Africans were the ones supposed to be the slaves. So this is a historically unique aspect of slavery. Before, in ancient Rome, ancient Greece, slavery existed. It was still brutal, but it was not based on the color of your skin. So we're going to learn more about the transatlantic slave trade, where specifically slaves were taken from, and where the majority of slaves went to with some map analysis next class.